Okay, so we talked about, rolling it out in the beginning, the early on, and whether that is, the first people in the first few months, and then, maybe a year later you're rolling out to new people. And again, that's just very, for those individuals, it's very early on. But let's talk more about maintaining the system as you go. Unfortunately, any software, you can't just implement it, have a few wins, and then drop it. There needs to be some sort of, maintaining the momentum that you have. So how would you go about that? Like, how do you continue to maintain that and hopefully even grow it a little bit too?
Yeah, I think the maintenance is a significant factor that perhaps people don't think enough about. That a lot of the focus is on, great, we've deployed the tool and like off you go now. Like, no,
Yeah.
maintenance is a really significant factor, and particularly the PMO function and the key decision makers need that whole community of people every week, every month to be updating the data in the tools so that we can make decisions on it. And how do you achieve that? And at a really basic level, the first thing for me is it has to be made intuitive.
Yeah.
So where you have users that are, so let's say resource managers, for example, who are logging in on a weekly, fortnightly basis, it's intuitive. They can remember, they've got the report set up, they remember how to log in, how to find the reports, their data's up to date, they're constantly looking at that. New business cases are coming through, they're going back in, having a quick glance before they provide you with feedback. For those users, and those are also the ones that will then start asking more advanced questions, but the maintenance of them is quite low because they're using the tool all the time. It's like using Microsoft Word. I don't need someone to keep reminding me, or Microsoft Excel. How do you do this? How do you do a pivot table in Microsoft Excel? Well, I can't remember. I've not done one for 3 years. So that the users have to be constantly engaging with the tool. And as we've already said, that requires them to be bought into it and getting value from it. The constant challenge is then the users that are not logging into the tool. So then you've got a constant barrage of, oh, can I have 5 minutes? I just can't remember how to do this. Can you show me again? And that 5 minutes is never 5 minutes. It's 45 minutes or an hour later, you've effectively done the action for them, and then you won't hear from them again for another month. So there needs to be something that is drawing them into the tool and making them use it every week to 2 weeks. That's a significant factor for me, and that never ends.
No, I think, that's one of the things we hear often. And one of the things we are even trying to solve for in terms of let's make the expectations of the team very clear. As people are rolling this out and really, the business change, the change management that comes with new processes, new solution, all of those things. Let's make the expectations on the users very clear. So, identifying those users' personas or user types, if you will. What are they in charge of when they go in the system, and what are they, what are they really doing? And then also being honest and being like, do they need access to this, or do they just need the output? Do they just need a report or something like that? I think there's a lot, there's a lot to be said of we'll give everyone access. Yeah, that's totally fine. But why? Is there a real need for it, or things like that? Because you're right, consistency is key. I use Microsoft Teams every day, Microsoft Outlook, or whatever. I could use it in my sleep, but things that are potentially newer, I am out here Googling how to do blank, and it is sometimes helpful, sometimes not.
How to create a pivot table.
Yes.
And that there's this kind of a thing that I've seen and used repeatedly about competence. So there's kind of unconscious incompetence. So you're doing things wrong, but you actually don't even know that you're doing them wrong. And the next level is conscious competence. You're doing things wrong, but at least I now know, and I'm trying to do something about the fact that I'm not doing things quite right. And then you get to conscious competence, where I can do it. I can jive dance, but I really need to concentrate on it. And then unconscious competence, where I drove to the cinema and back and I didn't even think about that. Breathing is unconscious competence. So how do you get people to the point where it's somewhere between conscious and unconscious competence? And that really plays back to what we've just discussed about rolling it out iteratively.
Mhm.
So, we've taught them how to log in, we've taught them how to enter the resources, we've then taught them how to analyze the resources, we've then taught them how to handle resource requests and split resource requests and reject resource requests.
Mhm.
And every time you take them up another level, the stuff that they were previously doing is becoming unconscious competence.
Yeah.
So that's really the journey.
Yeah. I really like that because I think it's very like I can almost imagine that in my head of like, where we are here, where we are there and whatnot. So I really like that thought of just like we have to understand where people are coming from to really make sure that we get to a place that we need to be because we do have that leadership buy-in. We do have an expectation on top of us. So, we have to be aware of where we stand today. I think that's a very, in terms of the people, and then also even throwing it back to the beginning of, you need to understand the problem at hand to know what the solution is. And it really just comes back to being very honest on where your people and where your process is, where your data, everything, where it is today to understand where it could be. That's a very good point.
Yeah. I think though the word of caution, because it's representing a really happy path solution here. You need to be prepared for resistance. At the end
Yeah.
of the day, some people will come with you and some will resist.
Yeah.
Um, to coin a phrase, you can please some of the people all of the time and all of the people some of the time, but you can't please all of the people all of the time.
Yeah.
And some, for whatever reasons, maybe they're using a different tool set that they're more familiar with and they prefer, they will directly resist. Now,
Yeah.
there are things that you can do about that. You can engage more strongly with them. So you've got the teams that are they're early adopters, they're advocates. You've got the teams that you're getting towards conscious and unconscious competence. And then you can put more time into the teams that are resisting you and really just try to understand what is the source of their resistance, what is the business problem,
Yeah.
try to see if you can find ways around that. I've certainly done a lot of experimenting with teams to try and meet their requirements more closely and make them advocates of the tool.
Yeah.
But there may be a point in time that even beyond escalating to your leadership team that committed to the tool, you might just have to say, well, actually, we're just not going to expend any more time on you
Yeah.
on this. And at some point, that may become a problem, and you're going to have to take accountability for that. But you could end up squandering a lot of your time and not supporting the rest of your community and
Yeah.
not supporting the leadership team in informed decision making if you invest too much time in that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a very good point too. I feel like, in society, so bringing it outside of, business and everything in society, I feel like, we could potentially we focus on those people who are providing the most resistance. And it's like, you know what? There comes a time where we just have to drop that and we have to focus over here because that is a better use of our time, better use of our energy. We're going to get further, and then when we pivot that to the business, like you said, if there is a team who's just like, hey, we're not going to do this, we don't want to, it's like, okay, well, that is your burden to bear eventually. For now, I'm gonna be over here. That's a very a very good point. And it's just a reality. Like it's just a reality. Very good point. So what role does internal communication and training a little bit, but what does that play in a successful rollout? And does that end once the system is live? I feel like we've been teasing this the last few conversations we've been having, but I just feel like communication is just such key in the beginning. And then what does that look like, once the system is live? What does that look like?
Yeah, I think it's almost a rhetorical question about, do you do the communication at the beginning and then walk away? Because clearly you don't. So,
Yeah.
continuous communication and training throughout the life cycle, even when it's live, is absolutely critical to the success of the implementation. Um, Obviously, in the beginning, it's all about selling the benefits and getting them buy-in. So, what is it we're deploying and what is your role in that? And here's some training and how am I going to help you and what value is that, bringing to your team? Why
Yeah.
should you engage with us? That's all the initial stuff. But then Once it's live, you need to have in place governance structures where you're using the data. There needs to be clear evidence that you're using the data. So whether it's some business case forum that you're approving business cases based on information about the availability of resources, or your business planning, those forums need to exist. You might want each team themselves or each division or subdivision to have their own forums where they're on an irregular basis, rather than looking at individual business cases coming through once a month. Maybe they are looking at, so what is the health of our resourcing this month? And is there a big gap between the supply and demand? Is that a data quality issue, or is that fairly accurate? If there is a big gap, what are we going to do about that? Are we going to commit to some actions? So either we're going to have to push to bring more internal resource in, or shuffle some work around different teams and departments, or outsource some work, or bring some contractors in, or we might have to actually stop or defer or delay some projects. So I think I'm keen to see that the forums that make decisions about projects are regularly using this data in their governance structure. But the teams that are suppliers of the resource should also, on a regular basis, be looking at the health of their resource pool. And that can extend even into your people surveys and what feedback you're getting, and do things seem to be improving? Are people still working longer hours than they should be? So that's really for the department to look at that, completely independently from individual series of business cases coming through.
Yeah. I feel, you just asked so many questions, and in the sense of, you need to be able to answer these things, and, communicating, these are the things you should be able to answer. And if you can't, why not, going down all of that. And I think, it's you, by asking all those questions and then being able to answer them, that is nothing but benefit. And when we communicate those benefits to people and say, hey, you can finally answer that question. Do we need to delay, defer, or just completely cancel this project? What is the health of my team? Is there any, what are the gaps here? Is that intentional? Is that poor data quality? There is nothing but opportunity, or there's nothing but things to gain from being able to answer those questions. And, having that internal communication to, one, explain in the beginning, this is what you're going to get. But then also over time, you are going to be able to answer these questions and be able to communicate these answers and be able to really leverage that data to be the expert in your organization. I always like to say, my goal is to get our customers, our users, promoted. I want you to be an expert. I want you to be the star in your organization. I want you to have all the answers, all of the data. And, so that's nothing but benefit. That's nothing but, something that they're going to be able to gain from, and the organization's going to benefit from. And I think that's such a key thing to focus on, especially when it comes to the communication around rolling it out and keep using it. It's just everything they're going to gain from the system, from the process, from the business change that you are implementing by doing all of this. I think that's just key. That's huge.
Yeah. And I think the other factor then, drifting more towards the training end of this conversation, we've already talked about rolling out iteratively. So even in part of our roadmap, and as part of getting the users more mature and more competent using the tool, obviously that requires constant comms, constant training. You will find that you've got your advanced power users because they're using it all the time, they love the tool. And you've got the laggards who need a lot more support. But then, as well as the kind of rollout in terms of what our roadmap is, and to use Tempest as an example, so obviously ProSymmetry on quarterly basis are rolling out new features, and so those features need to be trained out. There's been GUI changes to the tool, increased automation, and new functionality added, and that requires you to do further training to users on how that. And I think all the ones I remember made their jobs easier. Kind of automated some of the things they were doing manually. So
Yeah.
it never ends. And I think that's another part of a rollout of something like this that we don't think enough about. The level of resource to support that level of comms
Yeah.
ongoing into the future is significant. You
Yeah.
don't just deploy the tool and walk away.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, I completely agree. I mean, the most success that we see with Tempest, and then, in the broader sense, I'm going to make a generalization of a new process, of business change, is when there's someone who's really dedicated to it. Like, yes, you have the leadership commitment. Yes, you have these people who are bought in here, but you also need someone who is really committed to seeing that out and making sure that it's happening, because the best plans are just plans unless there's action behind them. And so you bring up a fantastic point too, of just the time that it takes for someone to, again, using Tempest as an example, each version has new features, has enhanced functionality, all of this. Some of them are going to, some of them are very relevant to the organization. So you need someone who's communicating that. You need someone who's training on that. Of course, leveraging as much as we give you 100%, but there's also like that's a fantastic point. Like, it just never ends. Communication is such key in any type of change. If you want it to be successful, like if you want this to be successful, you need to be able to communicate all the
Yeah.
time. We talked about this, I feel like, a lot already. But I want to make sure that we are really focusing on driving this point home of demonstrating the value when you are introducing a resource management solution or process, or, the change that is to come from this is, demonstrating that value. In your opinion, what is the best way to really demonstrate that for the team to understand the value?
Yeah, demonstrate the value is absolutely critical, because at the end of the day, if you're not delivering value by running this process and this software solution, then people won't use it.
Yeah.
It has to be evident to all participants that the data that they're entering and managing and juggling is being used for informed decision making.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a number of different ways that you can achieve that. We've already touched on some of them. So part of that can be you've got governance structure in place that approve business cases, and there's clear evidence that that resource management data is being provided to that forum to be part of their decision making, that they're taking that into account. So that is absolutely business critical. And I talked about the teams themselves running their own kind of health check on a regular basis, let's say monthly, where they're looking at the health of their resource management and whether there's a gap. They need the ability to be able to say, we've done what you said, we've filled in our data, and the data is telling us this. And let's say that the demand is 120% of resource. Well, probably the department can juggle that themselves without needing any sort of intervention.
Yeah.
I might classify that as amber. But I've seen examples where it's like 150, 200 or more, either at team department level or even down to key individual. That requires an intervention. So somebody needs to take an action. So as I said earlier, we're either going to not do those projects, or we're going to rephase and delay them, or we're going to actually, this is a good point, we need to bring more resource and we need to recruit, which also takes time, or we're going to bring some contractors in, which we can do by next week, or we're going to outsource some work or juggle between teams. But there needs to be an action.
Yeah.
And I think if the teams see that they're putting all of this effort into maintaining this resource management solution, but still not getting any decisions made to alleviate the problem, then they're just going to lose interest, lose motivation, and they're going to walk away from the tool. Their level of conformance to use of it will just go into decline.
Yeah. Yeah. That is such a great point. When we start any implementation of Tempest, and I don't want to make this about Tempest specifically, but when we start an implementation, I like to have our customers think of the end goal. What type of reporting do you need? What type of decisions do you need to be able to make? When you identified the need for this, this new process, this new solution, why? Like, what was that red flag for you? What do we need to be able to highlight and point out? And I think with any type of change within an organization, I feel like you need to have that end goal in mind and think about, who is this relevant for? Who does this matter to? Why does it matter to them? Because at the end of the day, resource management matters to the individual people. People don't want to be over allocated, unless it's like an agreed upon activity or something like that. People don't want too much work. People also don't want too little work. So you have the individuals, you have the project managers or portfolio managers, the people who are running the programs, and they want successful projects. Like, that's why they are here. Your resource managers, your team leads, whatever, they want happy teams. They want efficient teams. They want effective teams. They want their teams to be, actively participating. And they want their teams to be happy. So like, to continue going up the chain, I could, but I think you mentioned action, and there needs to be actionable results. There needs to be data that is being used to either say, one, our data quality is not good enough to make a decision. So how are we going to get better data quality? Or two, we are now able to make this decision to bring on a contractor, to deprioritize this project, to delay it, to do whatever, based on the information that we have. And you bring up to a fantastic point of, if people don't feel like the effort is really being considered, it's really being evaluated, they're going to abandon it. And I don't blame them at all. Like, I really don't blame someone for that. And any type of change in anything, there needs to be a real purpose for it. And that purpose needs to be sought through. Like, you need to finish it.
Yeah. And that, I think, we've talked a lot about the leadership team and the senior stakeholders that own the resources, but that conversation extends to the project managers.
Yeah.
So if you think about, I guess, most resource management solutions, but Tempest in this example, the resource entry in terms of my project needs this resource, these individuals, or these teams, that's been done by the project managers. Mm-hmm. The resource assessment has been done by the resource managers. But as a project manager, the value add to me is, I've requested this resource, you've approved it, that's committed now. I'm expecting you to deliver on that.
Yeah.
And if when I come to get that resource, it's not available, even though you committed to it, then I'm going to lose interest in using the tool as well.
Yeah.
And what I've seen is that the project managers, it's like they were, if you imagine like Tempest as a very large room with a door, the project managers are looking into that room through a very small keyhole. Their role in Tempest is relatively small compared to some of the other roles. Yeah. All they know is, we have to put this data in because the PMO have told us that we have to put this data in. And they don't necessarily see all of the benefits that come off the back of that. But this goes back to the conversation we just had about comms. If you engage the project managers as a community, you can demonstrate how the tool is used, how their input to the data is really important, and sell the benefits to them. So even though they're not directly seeing it in terms of when they log in, they understand how we're using it. There's evidence that we're using it for decision making, and that they're the recipients of that benefit because they're not getting locked and loaded resources when they need them.
Yeah. Yes. I think, driving home the purpose for each individual stakeholder group, that is, and then saying like, yeah, project manager, you're not going to have access to everything, but here's what you can do, and here's how it impacts, and here's how it benefits. I think I completely agree. When we think about, demonstrating the value, but even bringing it back, the communication, bringing it back in terms of like business requirements and case. So really taking it back to the beginning and thinking through, okay, we need the individuals to be doing the work that is relevant to get the most out of the system. I think about, okay, well, you likely have projects over here, resources over here in your HR system, projects in your whatever system, time in this system, maybe time tracking or whatever. And there comes a time where, going back to Tempest sits alongside these tools very well. And so there comes time for that automation of data. You don't want project managers going in and they can create projects in Tempest, just using that as an example, but is that the best use of their time? So thinking through, again, the business change and introducing these concepts and introducing a new tool, would you recommend would you pursue an integration to automate this data in the beginning?
So yeah, integration and automation is really important because you don't want to be wasting people's time. I would recommend integration, but I think it's what you integrate at what point. You've already made the point that a lot of these other systems really sit alongside Tempus. You probably didn't decide as part of your business case that you were going to replace one of those systems with Tempus, unless you had some spreadsheet process for resource management. You probably decided to replace that. So they do sit alongside. They can work independently, and they provide different functions.
Mm-hmm.
So, and Tempest has key integrations available to it. So you can integrate with Project or Jira, for example.
Yep.
But I wouldn't be going down the path of doing that too soon. I'd want maturity around the use of the tool and getting people up that maturity and competence journey that we talked about, and rolling out some of the more advanced features that we want to get before you then start talking to specific teams about, oh, we use, I don't know, Jira for our work stack management. Could we reduce some of the double keying effort by doing an integration? So I see that level of integration further down the roadmap.
Yeah.
In the beginning, I would absolutely integrate with your HR system.
Yeah.
The volume of data, even whether it's 100, 1,000, or larger community of resources, the volume of data, how often it changes, new joiners, leavers, people moving between departments, changing line managers. You might have day rate information in there. Some people being part-time versus full-time.
Yeah.
You do not want to be manually maintaining that data. That will balloon out of control very fast, as fast as if you've been using spreadsheets, really. So I would definitely say integration with your HR system should be done ideally immediately, or very shortly after maybe you've technically deployed and trialed Tempest, because that will just save you so much time further down the line. And if you don't do that and you're reliant on some people to manually be making those changes, inevitably that people and organizational data will be out of date.
Yeah.
And then it calls into question the accuracy of the data. You're sitting having a conversation about a project, and someone points at an individual and say they don't work there anymore, and it calls in all your data into question. So
Yeah.
I would definitely be pushing HR integration from the early stages.
Yeah. That's yes, and I completely agree with that. Your project integrations could come further down the line, but an integration with your HR system, data quality, it ensures that, like you mentioned, you may have people who are part-time, or if you are a global enterprise, rolling this out to a global team, your capacities are different. When we talk about resource management, you need to understand how much time how much time people work each week, each month, whatever that is, because that's what you're planning against. Like, even if you're planning an FTE, like, you just need to know this information. And truthfully, for all of the customers I have worked with, all of the integrations I have seen and assisted with, typically this information is in your HR system. Even if it is like scheduled weekly hours or something like that, that translates to capacity. So even just thinking, whoever it is administering the system long term, saving them time from having to make these updates. The data quality, again, going back to the beginning, this business change cannot be successful if the quality of data is not, getting better. It's probably not going to be the best in the beginning, but if the quality of data is not getting better, then this may not be as successful as you hope it is. So that is a fantastic point. There's something to be said for, making that automatic, and it's 2024. It can happen. It's okay to happen.
It's also an enabler for other things. So I think if you've got that from the beginning and that's driving up your supply demand data quality, but that also creates a potential future where you might want to use Tempest for time recording.
Yeah.
Now, inevitably, the company probably does have another time recording system that it's already using. But if a decision is made to move that into Tempest, then that's even more powerful because you've got supply data, demand data, and actual data as well.
Yes.
But you can't do any of that without having an integration to the HR system.
Yeah. Yeah. That is a very good point. All right. Well, Kenny, I feel like this was a really good conversation. And I also feel like we could spend maybe a whole day just talking about these things and diving into examples. But unfortunately, we are coming close to our time. And I don't know if everyone would want to hear us just talking back and forth about different things. Maybe. We'll see. So to put a nice bow on this, to really just wrap this up, again, we're talking about the critical items that makes changes in business successful. So what are those key items? Just a quick wrap up.
Yeah, so I think, we're talking about business change and resource management, and I'll try and summarize what I think we've covered. Obviously, in the introduction, we talked about the importance of a strong business case. You've got to be really clear. There is a business problem. We understand there's a business problem. We want to do something about that. And we've decided that deploying yet another tool into the organization is the right solution, that we're going to get value add for that. So you need to be very clear about what your business case is for this before you start. We talked about leadership commitment, so starting from the top. Inevitably, we've got a carrot and a stick, but someone at the top of your organization, whether it's the leadership team making decisions on business cases or the senior resource managers, they need to be bought into this. There's a business problem that they see. They absolutely agree. Their teams will spend time supporting this on top of their current day jobs where they're already resource stretched. I feel like the next point, we went round and round this throughout the whole presentation, but just to reiterate it again, don't eat the elephant in one big bite. Figure out where you're starting, what your minimum viable product is. Iterate both the comms and the training over time, bringing the users on that journey with you, adding more features into the melting pot of things that they can support. Having a broader roadmap. So ultimately, we want the what if scenario planning, but there's a lot of things that we have to do before they get there. So rolling it out iteratively is one of the critical things. And I think that's where you can consult with, as I've said earlier, the organization understands their processes, but you understand the tool.
Yeah.
Effective communication, training, driving and maintaining probably becomes the biggest element. So keeping users on board throughout that whole journey, constantly reviewing, are they using the tool? Are they getting value for the tool? Do they need a bit more support? That never stops. And obviously within that, we talked about just anticipating resistance. And if you can do something about that, if you can help that community, great. But at some point in time, you might need to let that go. But the communication and training is constant. Linked with all of that is demonstrating value add. At the end of the day, users will decline their use of a tool like this unless they see visible benefits. We've identified a resourcing problem. You didn't do anything about it. Why should I fill in the tool? I want to see tangible evidence that you're giving me a resource or moving assignments around or reprioritizing or stopping projects, that I'm getting a clear benefits from the small amount of effort of putting the data in. And then lastly, we talked about integration, and not to labour that point too far. A number of the integrations I would recommend doing later, but certainly the HR one is the most important, and you should do that from the beginning if possible.
And Kenny, where can people find you? Where can people connect with you? I want to make sure people are getting that access to you if they have more questions or follow-up. Where can people find you?
Well, I'm hoping if they've got more questions, they're going to come to you.
There. I
But
am open for them.
but my profile's on LinkedIn. It's the normal LinkedIn URL with Kenny Sharp on the end. So people can feel free to reach out to me and connect with me, build my network. Yeah, it was really good to talk to other people that are deploying solutions like this.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. That's one thing I love, I really love about this job is being able to make connections in, professional relationships, friendships with our users, with our admins, with people who are really in here, and then, being able to have those connections online as well and introducing people to, their peers with Tempest. So, all right. Well, thank you so much, Kenny. I really appreciate the time. You are absolutely awesome. And we'll talk soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kenny.